Vampires didn't just pop out of a coffin one day. Their legend has roots that stretch back thousands of years. Ancient civilizations from Mesopotamia to Greece had tales of demons or spirits that fed on humans. But the vampire as we know it today really took shape in Eastern European folklore during the Middle Ages. Picture this, it's the 18th century in rural Eastern Europe. Plagues are ravaging villages, and people are desperate for explanations. When a corpse is exhumed and appears unnaturally well preserved, panic ensues. Vampire! They cry. These fears gave birth to many of the vampire traits we know today: pale skin, fangs, and an aversion to sunlight. One of the most famous real vampires was Arnold Powell, a Serbian soldier who allegedly became a vampire after death in the 1720s. His story spread like wildfire, fueling vampire hysteria across Europe. It's fascinating to think that these centuries-old fears still echo in our modern vampire tales. The leap from folklore to literature was a game-changer for vampires. In 1819, John Polidori published The Vampire, spelt with a Y, featuring Lord Ruthven, a charming aristocratic vampire, a far cry from the peasant revenants of folklore. This suave, dangerous vampire became a template for many that followed. But it was Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1897 that really sank its teeth into popular culture. Count Dracula, with his castle in the Carpathian Mountains and his move to England, became the vampire. Stoker brilliantly blended folklore, gothic horror, and Victorian anxieties to create a character that still haunts us today. No discussion of vampire lore would be complete without mentioning Abraham Van Helsing, the archetypal vampire hunter first introduced in Bram Stoker's Dracula. In the novel, Van Helsing is a Dutch doctor with extensive knowledge of both medicine and the occult, embodying the conflict between science and superstition in his quest to vanquish evil. Van Helsing's character has evolved significantly in popular culture, portrayed in various adaptations as everything from an aged professor to a young dynamic action hero. Notable portrayals include Peter Cushing's definitive version in the Hammer horror films, Anthony Hopkins' slightly unhinged interpretation in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Hugh Jackman's action-oriented reimagining in Van Helsing. The enduring popularity of Van Helsing speaks to our fascination with those who stand against darkness. This legacy continues to inspire new interpretations, such as the TV series Van Helsing, which features a female descendant of the original character in a post-apocalyptic world. Fast forward to the late 20th and early 21st centuries, and vampires experienced a renaissance. Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire gave us introspective, tormented vampires grappling with their immortality. Then came Stephenie Meyer's Twilight saga, transforming vampires into teenage heartthrobs and not sparkling, although yes, sparkling, a global phenomenon. Now, let's sink our fangs into some juicy vampire lore. What kills a vampire? What gives them power? The answers vary wildly depending on which stories you believe. Sunlight is often cited as lethal to vampires, reducing them to ash. But this is actually a relatively modern invention popularized by the 1922 film Nosferatu. In many older tales, vampires could walk about in daylight just with reduced powers. Stakes through the heart, decapitation, and fire are more traditional vampire slaying methods. And let's not forget garlic, a staple of vampire repelling for centuries. Some theories suggest this belief arose because garlic was thought to ward off diseases, which were sometimes attributed to vampires. Holy objects like crucifixes and holy water are also said to repel vampires. This connection to Christianity is interesting as it positions vampires as unholy or demonic beings. one of the strangest vampire weaknesses. Some folklore claims they're compulsive counters. Scatter seeds or grains near their grave, and they'll be forced to count each one, keeping them busy until dawn. Now let's sink our fangs into one of the most iconic associations in vampire lore, and that's the connection between vampires and bats. This link is so ingrained in popular culture that it's hard to imagine a vampire story without a few bats fluttering ominously in the background. But where did this association come from? The connection largely stems from the discovery of vampire bats in the Americas in the 16th century. These bats, unlike their fruit-eating cousins, actually do feed on blood, though usually from cattle, not humans. When European colonizers learned about these creatures, it didn't take long for the association with the vampires of Old World folklore to take hold. Bram Stoker cemented this connection in the popular imagination with Dracula. In the novel, Count Dracula has the ability to transform into a bat, using this form to fly and spy on his victims. This shape-shifting ability has since become a staple of vampire fiction. Interestingly, while vampire bats do exist, they're quite different from the giant menacing creatures often portrayed in vampire media. Real vampire bats are small, about the size of a mouse, and their bites are usually pretty harmless to humans. They use their sharp teeth to make a small incision and then lap up the blood with their tongues, aided by an anticoagulant in their saliva. The bat-vampire connection has led to some unfortunate misconceptions about bats in general. Many bat species are crucial for ecosystem health, acting as pollinators and pest controllers. So while the association with vampires might make bats seem spooky, in reality they're fascinating and important creatures, and I think they're really quite adorable. In vampire media today, bats continue to play a significant role. Whether it's a cloud of bats announcing a vampire's arrival, or a vampire transforming into a bat to escape danger, these flying mammals remain an integral part of vampire iconography. Believe it or not, there's some science behind vampire myths. Several medical conditions might have contributed to vampire folklore. Porphyria. This rare blood disorder can cause extreme sensitivity to sunlight, receding gums, which could make the teeth appear longer, and reddish urine and feces. Rabies. This disease can cause increased aggression, hypersexuality, and aversion to strong stimuli, like light and strong smells. Garlic, anyone? Premature burial. In times before modern medicine, people were occasionally buried alive by mistake. Crikey. If they woke up and clawed their way out, you can imagine the terror that would cause. Decomposition. Natural processes can make a corpse appear to have fed, with blood-like fluids seeping from the mouth and the body appearing plumper. It's amazing how our ancestors created these intricate myths to explain phenomena they couldn't understand. In a way, vampires are a testament to human imagination and our need to make sense of the world around us. While we've explored various ways to ward off vampires, our ancestors had some rather extreme methods for ensuring the dead stayed dead. These burial practices, often gruesome, reflect the deep-seated fears people had about vampires rising from the grave. Face-down burials. In some cultures, suspected vampires were buried face down. The idea was that if they tried to claw their way out, they'd only dig themselves deeper. The brick in the mouth. In some parts of Europe, particularly in Italy, archaeologists have found skeletons with bricks or stones wedged between their jaws. This vampire treatment was believed to prevent the dead from chewing through their shrouds and rising from the grave. Sickles across the throat. In Poland, some burials have been found with sickles placed across the deceased's throat or abdomen. If the vampire tried to rise, it would decapitate or disembowel itself. Iron stakes. In some Slavic countries, iron stakes were driven through the body to pin the deceased to the ground, literally staking them in their graves. Bottles of holy water. In some Greek burials, bottles of holy water were placed in the grave to keep the deceased's soul from leaving the body. These practices might seem extreme to us today, but they show just how real the fear of vampire was to our ancestors. It's a chilling reminder of the power the vampire myth held over people's imaginations and beliefs back then. While Dracula might be the most famous vampire, many cultures around the world have their own unique vampire-like creatures. Let's take a whirlwind tour of some lesser-known vampire legends. Banshee, from Scotland. These beautiful female vampires are said to prey on unsuspecting male travellers in the Scottish Highlands. They dance with their victims before feasting on their blood. Loup-garou, from the Caribbean. This shape-shifting vampire sheds its skin at night and flies through the air as a ball of fire, seeking victims to drain of blood. Penanggalan, Malaysia. Perhaps one of the most gruesome vampires, the Penanggalan, is a floating female head with trailing entrails that detaches from its body to feed on the blood of pregnant women and newborns. Jiangshi. Often called hopping vampires, these reanimated corpses in China hop around with their arms outstretched, absorbing the life force of the living. Yaramayahu, Aboriginal Australia. This small, red, frog-like creature drops from trees into its victims, draining their blood with suckers on its fingers and toes. A Sanbosam, from West Africa. With iron teeth and hooks for feet, this vampire-like creature hangs from trees to catch and devour unsuspecting passers-by. These diverse legends show how the concept of blood drinking or life force stealing creatures is almost universal. It's fascinating to see how different cultures have interpreted this basic fear in their own unique ways. Vampires have undergone quite the makeover over the years. From Nosferatu's rat-like Count Orlok to the glittering Edward Cullen, vampires have run the gamut from terrifying to tantalizing. In film, vampires have been reinvented countless times. Bela Lugosi's iconic portrayal in the 1931 Dracula set the standard for the suave, cape-wearing vampire. Christopher Lee brought a more visceral, bloody edge to the character in the Hammer horror films of the 50s and 60s. The 80s and 90s saw vampires become anti-heroes and even comedic characters. The Lost Boys, probably one of my favourite vampire movies of all time, gave us ultra-cool teenage vampires, while Buffy the Vampire Slayer blended horror, comedy, and teen drama to create a cultural phenomenon. Among the most notable vampire films of the 1990s is Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula from '92. This lavish adaptation breathed new life into the classic story, becoming an instant Gothic classic. Gary Oldman's portrayal of Dracula is nothing short of mesmerizing. At turns terrifying, seductive, and even sympathetic. His performance, along with those of Winona Ryder as Mina Murray, Elizabetha, and Sadie Frost as the ill-fated Lucy Westenra, brought a new depth and sensuality to these iconic characters. The film's lush visuals, combining Victorian-era settings with surreal, dreamlike sequences, created a uniquely atmospheric take on the vampire mythos. The film's impact extends beyond its theatrical run. Its unique blend of horror, romance, and visual spectacle has earned it a dedicated cult following. In the 21st century, vampires have become more human than ever. Shows like True Blood and The Vampire Diaries explore vampire society and politics while still delivering plenty of romance and drama. While we've touched on some major vampire works, the genre is rich with cult classics that have left an indelible mark on vampire lore and pop culture. Here are a few noteworthy entries. Interview with a Vampire from 1994. Based on Anne Rice's novel, this film, starring Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, brought a new level of gothic romanticism to vampire cinema. Its exploration of the moral struggles of vampires influenced many subsequent works. In 2022, it received a fresh television adaptation on AMC. This series, starring Jacob Anderson and Sam Reed, brings Rice's lush gothic worlds to life with a contemporary twist. Set in both the early 20th century New Orleans and present-day Dubai, the show explores themes of sexuality, race, and the nature of evil through its immortal characters. What We Do in the Shadows from 2014. This mockumentary by Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement offers a hilarious take on vampire lore, following a group of vampire roommates in modern-day Wellington. Its success spawned an equally beloved TV series. Near Dark, 1987. Catherine Bigelow's neo-Western vampire film blended horror with the aesthetics of the American West, creating a unique and influential vampire story. Blade, from 1998. This action horror film, based on the Marvel comic, was one of the first successful comic book adaptations and offered a new take on vampire hunters with its Dhampir, half-vampire protagonist. Only Lovers Left Alive from 2013. Jim Jarmusch's atmospheric film presents vampires as cultured, world-weary artists, offering a more philosophical take on immortality. Let the Right One In is a haunting and beautiful vampire tale set in 1980s Stockholm. It tells the story of a bullied 12-year-old boy who forms a deep bond with a child vampire. The film's subtle horror, emotional depth, and exploration of themes like loneliness and coming of age earned it widespread critical acclaim. The American remake from 2010, directed by Matt Reeves, starring Chloe Grace Moretz, successfully adapted the story to an American setting while maintaining the original emotional core. In TV, Being Human, both the UK original and US remake, explored the challenges of supernatural beings trying to live normal lives, while Penny Dreadful wove vampires into a tapestry of Victorian Gothic horror. The 2020 BBC Netflix miniseries Dracula, created by Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat of Sherlock fame, offered a bold reimagining of Bram Stoker's classic. The show aimed to blend horror with dark humour and modern twists on the familiar tale. These works, among others, showcase the versatility of vampire stories, from horror to comedy, action to drama. They demonstrate how the vampire myth continues to evolve and adapt, speaking to new generations while maintaining its timeless appeal. While Hollywood has certainly played a major role in shaping our modern vampire image, other film industries around the world have put their own spin on vampire lore. Thirst, from South Korea in 2009. Directed by Park Chan-wook, this film follows a Catholic priest who becomes a vampire after a failed medical experiment. It's a unique blend of horror, romance, and social commentary. Vampire Knight, Japan, 2008. This popular manga and anime series is set in a high school attended by both humans and vampires, exploring themes of forbidden love and vampire society. Rigor Mortis, Hong Kong, 2013. This horror film draws heavily on Chinese vampire lore, particularly the hopping vampire or Jiangshi. Afflicted, Canada, 2013. This found footage style film offers a fresh take on the vampire transformation story. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Iran, USA 2014. Billed as the first Iranian vampire western, this stylish black and white film blends genres in a unique way. Blood, the Last Vampire, Japan 2000. This anime film and its various adaptations present a modern take on vampires, blending traditional lore with science fiction elements. Vampires have long been a source of inspiration in the music world, influencing everything from gothic rock to mainstream pop. Let's explore how these creatures of the night have left their mark on the music industry. Gothic rock. Bands like Bauhaus, with their 1979 single Bela Lugosi's Dead, helped establish the connection between Gothic aesthetics and vampire themes. Metal. Many metal bands have incorporated vampire themes, with Cradle of Filth's album Draconian Times being a notable example. Pop music. Even mainstream pop hasn't been immune to vampire influence. Michael Jackson's Thriller video famously featured the singer transforming into various monsters, including a vampire-like creature. Concept albums. Some artists have created entire albums around vampire themes. For example, Théâtre des Vampires is an Italian gothic metal band whose entire discography revolves around vampire lore. Vampire-inspired artists. Some musicians have adopted vampire-like personas. Marilyn Manson, for instance, has often played with vampire imagery in his performances and music videos. Film soundtracks. Vampire movies have also contributed to music, with soundtracks like those for The Lost Boys and Interview with a Vampire becoming cult classics in their own right. Recent pop culture. The Twilight Saga brought vampire-themed music to a new generation, with artists like Muse and Paramore contributing to the soundtracks. From the dark and brooding sounds of gothic rock to the teenage anthems of Twilight, vampires have proven to be enduring muses in the music world, their influence spanning genres and generations. As an author myself, I've been deeply inspired by the resurgence of vampire fiction in the 21st century. It's amazing to see how fellow writers continue to breathe new life into these immortal beings. One series that has truly captured my heart is The Vampires of Marchwood by Shalini Boland. This captivating series, which begins with Hidden, blends historical fiction with vampire lore in a way that I find utterly enchanting. I've also had the pleasure of contributing to this genre with my own series, The Raven Witch Saga. Writing these books allowed me to explore the fascinating intersection of vampires, witches, and other supernatural elements. And there are so many other authors whose work I absolutely adore in this genre. Rachel Kane's Morganville Vampires series, for instance, offers a thrilling take on a vampire-run town. PC and Kristen Kath's House of Night series presents a unique biological approach to vampirism that I find fascinating. I'm also a huge fan of how authors like Kirsten White incorporate vampires into broader supernatural worlds, as seen in her Paranormalcy trilogy. And of course, I can't forget to mention Rochelle Mead's Vampire Academy series, which has captivated so many young readers. Other authors I love, like Maggie Stiefvater, Becca Fitzpatrick and Meg Cabot, may not focus solely on vampires, but their contributions to young adult supernatural fiction have been incredibly influential. As both a reader and a writer, I'm continually amazed by how these authors, and so many others, keep finding new and exciting ways to explore vampire mythology. Vampire fashion has evolved alongside their portrayal in media. The classic Dracula look, evening wear, cape, and slicked back hair dominated for decades. But as vampires became more relatable, their fashion evolved too. The Gothic subculture, which emerged in the 1980s, drew heavily from vampire aesthetics. Black clothing, pale makeup, and dramatic accessories became signatures of the style. Vampires and goths have been intertwined ever since, each influencing the other. In more recent portrayals, vampires often blend in with contemporary fashion, only revealing their true nature when they bare their fangs. The Twilight series, for instance, had its vampires dressing in stylish modern clothes, a far cry from Dracula's cape. Believe it or not, but there are people today who identify as vampires. This modern subculture, known as real vampires, is a fascinating phenomenon. These individuals may consume small amounts of blood, with consent, or believe they feed on energy. It's important to note that this lifestyle choice isn't about literally being undead, but rather about identity, community, and a deep connection to vampire mythology and aesthetics. The vampire community has its own social structures, events, and even legal and ethical guidelines. One of the most famous vampire-inspired gatherings is the Whitby Goth Weekend, held twice a year in Whitby, England, the very town that inspired Bram Stoker to write Dracula. This festival celebrates Gothic culture, music, and of course vampires, attracting thousands of visitors from around the world. For those who want to immerse themselves in vampire lore, there are numerous themed tourist destinations. Transylvania in Romania, the heartland of vampire tourism, where visitors can tour Bran Castle, often marketed as Dracula's castle. New Orleans in the USA, known for its vampire-themed tours and as the setting for Anne Rice's vampire novels. Forks, Washington, USA. This small town became a major tourist destination after it was featured as a setting for the Twilight Saga. Highgate Cemetery in London. In the 1970s, there were reported sightings of a vampire-like creature in this Victorian-era cemetery. These destinations show how the vampire myth has become a significant part of modern culture and tourism, allowing fans to experience the atmospheric locations that have inspired vampire lore throughout history. It's a testament to the enduring power of the vampire myth that it continues to inspire such vibrant subcultures and experiences. Recent works have used vampires to explore themes like addiction, social inequality, and environmental concerns. The 2020 Netflix series V-Wars imagines a world where climate change releases an ancient virus that turns people into vampires, blending vampire lore with very modern anxieties. As we look to the future, it's clear that vampires will continue to evolve, reflecting our changing society. They'll likely continue to influence not just literature and film, but also fashion, design, and even technology. Who knows, maybe one day we'll have vampire-inspired virtual reality experiences or AI-generated vampire stories. From ancient folklore to modern pop culture, vampires have shown a remarkable ability to adapt and endure. They've been monsters, tragic heroes, romantic leads, and everything in between. Their longevity in our collective imagination is perhaps the truest form of immortality. Vampires tap into our deepest fears of death, of the unknown, of our own dark desires. But they also embody what many of us crave: eternal youth, power, and a dark, seductive allure. They're a mirror for humanity, reflecting our fears and desires in equal measure. So the next time you watch a vampire movie, read a vampire novel, or even decide to add a gothic touch to your wardrobe or home, remember, you're participating in a tradition that spans centuries and cultures. The vampire myth is a testament to the power of human imagination and our endless fascination with the mysterious and the macabre. As we end our journey through the world of vampires, I can't help but wonder, what is it about these creatures that captivates you? Do you have a favourite vampire story or character? Or perhaps you've been inspired to add a touch of vampire style to your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, stay spooky, and watch out for things that go bump in the night. This is Susie Turner signing off, at least until the sun sets again. Then came Stephanie Meyer's Twilight Saga, sparking a global phenomenon. 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 Oh my god, I've got to stop. This is Susie Turner signing off, at least until the sun sets again.